Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I hope you're all excited because today we're going to try something new. If you've been with the channel for a while, you've probably noticed that many of my AWS tutorials revolve around serverless applications with AWS Lambda. Now, one problem with large cloud providers is that development and deployment could be quite time consuming, especially if you're new to cloud computing. But thanks to the sponsor of this video, building serverless applications just became one step easier. This is Lolo Code, a minimal code required integration function as a service platform that allows you to build cloud agnostic serverless applications with very quick deployment. Lolo Code is a startup based out of Sweden that will soon be expanding into its open beta for all users. The platform already supports your typical event triggers such as HTTP requests, WebSocket connections, data streams, and more. And now, before we start with the tutorial, there's just a few important things to mention. The first of which is that currently the platform only supports Node.js runtimes. And so if you have knowledge or some background working with Node.js or JavaScript applications, that would certainly be helpful. Second, if you want to see other tutorials of projects that you can build or have been built with Lolo, feel free to go to the homepage and scroll down to the bottom, and you can find other videos, and hopefully you can draw inspiration from this as well. And last but not least, if you already have experience building serverless applications such as with AWS Lambda and whatnot, you will certainly find a platform like Lolo to be a lot more faster and convenient just to get things up and running from the get-go, mainly because of its low code, minimal code requirement, and also its quick deployment functionalities. But that's enough of me describing the platform. Instead, let's build a CRUD API together that connects to a PostgreSQL database to show you just how easy it is to get your next serverless application up and running. And so to get started, you're going to want to navigate to the home page of the platform, which is lolo.co. And you're going to see right now at the time of recording that they're currently still in private beta, so you will need a sign-up code by clicking here, which you can sign up for. They're pretty lenient with the process, but at the once this video is released, it's likely that it'll already be in open beta, so you probably wouldn't need a sign-up code. But regardless, once you have an account registered and all ready to go, you can feel free to click console from here, or just click the button at the top right here, and this will bring you to the platform's console where you can start building your applications. And so as you can see here, the homepage of the console, we have all our applications, and I've just been playing around with it a little bit, and that's why I have a few applications up and going. And so on the left here, if you're just getting started, feel free to check out these demo tutorials. I've done them both, and they're actually really quick. Within a few minutes, you'll have your application up and running. You can play around with it, which is really awesome. And at the bottom here, you can also visit all of its documentation, which will redirect you to a page like this. Their documentation is pretty thorough. It explains things pretty well, and I'm sure you won't have too much trouble navigating around. So that's that. In terms of the actual application that we will be building today, let's take a look over here. I already pre-designed it, but we'll go over it together. So the first thing we want to do, go over is that whenever you're creating an application, you're presented with this sort of UI or canvas where you can kind of use the UI to design the pipeline and sort of architecture of your serverless application. As you can see here with this interface, it's really easy to see what components are connected to other components and how the data will sort of flow through all your components. And just in terms of our current application, you'll notice that we do set up our HTTP endpoints, which is sort of the entry point of our application because it's basically an API. And then afterwards, we're going to create our first sort of serverless function, if you want to call it that, here, which will basically process the data from the HTTP endpoint and then establish your connection to the database. And then afterwards, it will route any sort of relevant data in the connection down further to our subsequent functions, which will basically perform all the logic in terms of your HTTP methods, and that'll be like your post, get, put, and delete. So respectively, it'll perform those operations. If you don't want to follow along with this tutorial, there's also other examples of pre-built functions that are provided for you. If you just click on the plus sign on the top left here, you can take a look at pre-built library functions, as they call it, and event triggers, which you can basically set up, and it'll be really useful just for playing around with things on the platform. There's definitely a lot of capabilities, and we're just covering a subset of them in this video. And so to get started, we're just going to go back to the home page here, and we're going to click Create App. And so I'm just going to call this CRUD API Postgres, and then we'll hit Next. And awesome, so we're back here now onto the canvas. And so the first thing we want to do is we're actually going to use HTTP triggers, the event triggers provided for us in this tutorial, because we need to set it up for our API. And I believe we're going to need 4 of them precisely. I'm not sure. Okay, so that's 3. Sorry, let me just click one more. And so we can hide that menu now. And cool thing is we can also just quickly align them to make it look nice. And awesome. So we're going to have one of each, one for each of the HTTP methods in CRUD. And so the first thing is going to be create, which is going to be post. And so in terms of just like a quick sample use case, we're going to have a product table, which is basically going to store a list of products. And so respectively, we're going to call our resource or path product. And so on the left here, you can also take a look at a few other things, just like here. Under here, you can take a look at the actual URL that we're going to call this endpoint at once we have deployed everything. And we set parameters. And the one important thing about pretty much all components on Lolo's platform is that each component, and by component, I just mean each sort of like box here, each sort of box here on the canvas, it will always have a set of input and output ports. And you can, of course, have none and just configure it to have as many as you want. The thing about this is that basically the way that Lolo works is that it's the ports are going to help you pass sort of data and anything that you want to pass down the pipeline and whatnot. And so that kind of helps you connect things visually as well. So you can configure that here for each sort of like boxed component. And so yeah, that's the port section. Just in terms of options, we can just write a quick description and change the name. I'm just going to call this post because that's what it is. And then pretty much everything should auto save. So as long as you hit back, it should automatically save. And as you can see here, it's been renamed. So I'm just going to quickly do it here again for get. And we're just going to call this product. And as you can see here, it has been updated for the resource path. Ports, we can just leave it like that for now. And we're just going to call this get as well. Awesome. So I'm just going to quickly do the rest and we'll be back. And we are back now. And as you can see, I've just set it up for the other HTTP methods. And so what we can do now actually is because these are 4 different methods that kind of just serve one purpose, and basically it's serving the purpose of setting up our HTTP endpoints, what we can do is actually create something called a composite function. And if you're ever looking for something on documentation, just go to the documentation site and just click search here. All I did was type composite, and it led me, the first thing led me directly to what I was looking for. So basically, as you can see here, composite functions are just a neat way of allowing you to sort of group related functions together into one sort of outer function. So yeah, so this is what we're going to do. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to hold down the shift key and we're going to press all the ones that we want to group together. And we're going to click here, create composite. And so as you can see, they're kind of highlighted or have some border around it. It'll take a second. So we'll just give it a second. Awesome. Okay, so once that has been created, we can double click again, click settings here, and I'm just going to call this HTTP endpoints just to keep things the same as this one. And so the next thing that you probably notice we're missing is setting up all the outputs ports. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this again. And under settings, I'm going to go ahead and add some ports. So the first one we want to add is post, and then we want to do get, put, delete. Awesome. So as you can see, this is what it's going to look like once we have everything set up. And we hit back, it has been saved. And so before we move on, we have to do one thing that might be easily forgotten, and that's to make sure that our ports are connected here. And so basically we want to double click into our composite function. And once we have clicked, generated all these ports under the settings menu, if we go back into the canvas for the HTTP endpoints composite function, you'll notice that these dotted elliptical shaped, sort of oval shaped outputs have been generated for us. And so we just want to make sure we align them here, and then we're going to go ahead and connect them all. So that'll be post to post, get to get, put to put, and delete to delete. Awesome. And this should automatically save, and we can go ahead and click back. And so yeah, this is the first step in just setting up the HTTP endpoints. If you were doing this through code, you'll probably have to use something like Express or some other framework just to set up all your HTTP endpoints, start your server and whatnot. But with a click of a few buttons, and we've written 0 code so far, we've already set up our HTTP endpoints. But yeah, obviously we need to set it up so that we actually get some responses when we call the API. So let's go ahead and do that. And actually, just right before we do that, the first thing we want to do here is also create our new function in the middle, which is sort of going to establish that connection to the Postgres database. So I'm just going to call this establish connection. And as you can see here, the port that we need is one input port because all of the HTTP endpoints are going to be routed to the single function because all of them require a connection to the database. And then output ports, we're going to set it up again, just four ports for your CRUD methods. And so we're going to go ahead and do that here. I'm just going to call this in. Oh, sorry. There's actually, by default, there's already one provided. You can also remove it, but we're going to leave it like that. And we're going to remove this default output port, and we're just going to create our own ones with our own names. So that's post, get, put, and delete. Awesome. So now we have set it up to be exactly the same. And you can also set up your logging, just some basic logging configurations here, which is pretty neat. We're going to go ahead and save that. And this is one of the fun parts where basically you can just drag and connect these components together. And once you have done that, behind the scenes, Lolo Code pretty much connects everything for you. So awesome, we've done this now. The final part, we can just begin by pretty much setting up all the event handlers down here. So we're going to go ahead and create one for each of them. I'm just going to create one first, and I'll probably pause and do the rest behind the scenes. So I'm just going to call this get handler. You can call it whatever you want. And just to reflect here, you don't actually need an output port here, but I've kept it in because I just didn't remove it. But we can remove it. We need one input port, so we can keep it like that. So just to keep things more clear, well, let's remove the output port, and we'll return it back here. Awesome. And so we also need it for the other ones. So I'll be back once all those have been added. And we are back, and we set up all the handlers. And just to be mindful, we have not written any code yet for these, specifically these 5 functions here. We'll do that in a second. But let's just connect all these components. So post goes to put, post get go to get, put to put, and delete to delete. Awesome. And so if you probably noticed already, when you create a new function, actually setups with some boiler code, you can feel free to read the documentation. These are called lifecycle methods. Specifically, if you're familiar with things like Lambda, this is going to be really similar as your Lambda handler, which is your main function that's going to be called per invocation. And so that's what we're going to modify. And awesome. So I've pre-written the code, so I'm just going to pull it up here, and I'll paste it in. I'm trying something new, so I'm going to paste it in and then just quickly explain what's going to happen. And yeah, so here, just to replace the code, what we're going to do here is we're going to import the Postgres npm module. This is pretty much the same function signature as before. And the first thing we're going to do is pretty much we're going to extract this route method from the context, which is provided for every event or function handler on Lolo. And basically, this will allow us to route any relevant data to the port downstream of the pipeline. And of course, here, by default, if you can also specify it as, you can just write it like this so that if there's only one output port, you can just route it directly. It'll just know. But if you have specific ports with different names, we're going to have to pass in the actual name of the port, which is why, because I have named every single port based off of its HTTP method in lowercase, that's why I'm converting the HTTP method to lowercase here, so that we're writing it to the correct port. And yeah, and so we're also going to store our connection string to the Postgres database as just like a single connection string into the environment variable, so we can retrieve it from the environment variable under context. And so that's what I'm doing here. Here we're just pretty much establishing a client connection to the Postgres database. We're creating a new client, and then we're establishing a connection. And then what we're going to do here is that we're actually going to pass this client downstream by assigning it to the event, which we're going to route down here to all the outputs downstream. So that's pretty much it for the established connection handler. Let's go ahead and quickly do one for post. So for post, we're going to, assuming everything works correctly, we can double click here, and then I'm just going to paste this in here. Basically what's going to happen, it's pretty similar and pretty simple actually, as you can see. What we're going to do here is we're going to extract this emit method and essentially from the context, and the emit method, if you just visit the documentation, you'll know that the emit method allows you to sort of create a response for all your HTTP endpoints. And that's exactly what we're doing in the last line here. We're just emitting a response. This is fixed. And here is the response body, basically, this is the response body, but basically this is going to specify what's the nature of the response. And in particular, we're just going to always return status code 200 for the simplicity, and we're just going to return the exact entry that we stored in the database as the response back, just so that we can get some form of confirmation. And in the middle here, basically, I can also send documentation here for the Postgres module that we're using, but feel free to visit it here yourself as well. Basically, what we're doing here is we're issuing a query on the client that we have passed down from the event, from the previous function, the establish connection function. And we're just inserting into the products table, which I have already set up. And we're just inserting two fields, which is the name of the product and also just like a quantity. So that's going to be like a string and an integer. And then of course, we also want to quickly end the connection. One thing that I haven't tried, or sorry, I have tried, I couldn't really figure out, and feel free to let me know in the comments below if you were able to figure this out, is how to set up a connection pool. It gets a little tricky. I know there's something to do with state, not to go too much in detail here, but I wasn't able to figure that out. Hopefully, perhaps there's some more documentation on that moving forward. But of course, working with serverless applications with a relational database is always a little iffy. They do have tutorials working with MongoDB, which is definitely helpful. But we're going to go ahead with this, just establish a connection each time. It's a little bit inefficient, but for the sake of the tutorial, let's let it be. And yeah, so that's our post handler. I'm just going to click back here. Awesome. And we're going to go ahead and quickly do our get handler. So I have this pasted on another tab. Let me just quickly copy it over. And awesome, to get the formatting right. Okay, cool. As you can see here, we're extracting the emit function again. And again, the similar case here, we're just sort of emitting. In this case, we're responding with all the rows in the body of the response. And just in the middle here, we're just issuing a simple SQL query. We're just going to get all the products where the name matches the name that we pass in the body of the request. And of course, we also want to close the connection by calling end. So I'm going to hit back here. That's pretty much end. We're going to go do put, which is our update. As you can see here, it's actually getting pretty simple. There's not much code to get this up and running, especially if we're not handling all the edge cases and error cases. Once again, we're calling the emit, extracting the emit. At the bottom here, we emit the response. And our simple query is an update query. We're going to update the products table. We're going to set the fields, the name and the quantity fields for that entry, where any entry has the name of our specified name in the event body. And so because this is a parameterized query to prevent against, say, like SQL injection attacks, this is why we have to pass in the arguments separately. And so just basically for now, we're going to pass everything into the body of the request. So this is our put request, and I'm going to hit back here and delete. And of course, I know I'm trying something new here. We might be going a little fast. So please let me know if that is the case. But yeah, so last but not least, we have our delete handler. It should be fairly similar. We extract the emit function and then issue our delete request, of course, our delete query. And then we make sure that we pass in the name of the product that we want to delete in the request body. And then basically we're calling delete from products where the name matches that name. And then we're just going to make sure we return that so that we have it back. And then we're going to also return that here as into the response of our HTTP endpoint. And yeah, that's pretty much it for all the code. And now we can actually go ahead and save our first version. We're just going to go ahead and click save. Now, before we get things deployed, we actually have to import our module. As you can, and if you're familiar with Node.js applications, you'll know that we usually install modules by specifying under package.json, or you can run like npm install or yarn add. And so the one we need in particular is PG, or Node Postgres, specifically version 8.7.3. So I'm just going to copy that over. And what we want to do is head over to settings. Under modules, they kind of tell you the format that they allow in terms of specifying your node modules. We're just going to do it with a simple format. We're going to type in, as you can see here, I've actually experimented with this. I believe any of these, except for this one, this is incorrect because the module name is just PG, but the other ones should also work. But the shortest one would just be PG at, and then your version number. So if we just hit that, you don't need to click plus here. We can just click save here, and that should pretty much install it behind the scenes once we deploy. And the next thing that we need here is, of course, to also add in our environment variable. This is sort of like their version of an environment variable. They call it an app variable. Of course, if you're actually putting secrets, I also don't really recommend putting environment variables, but just for the sake of keeping things simple, we'll store our entire connection string here. And so I'm going to go ahead and grab it, or pause the video and I'll grab it and then I'll paste it in. All right, so we're back and I just pasted it in. This is just a simple free tier Heroku Postgres instance that I spawned up. So for the sake of the tutorial, because we have already written this in our code that the variable is going to be called connections or con_string, I'm going to call it name it as such. And we're just going to click create here. And awesome, so that should create the environment variable for us. And now this is probably going to be the shortest section of the tutorial. Basically, it's a deployment section. All you have to do is click run. And awesome, so now it should be running. And the log that we do want to see in order to make sure that it is indeed up and running is under logs here, you want to see that see this log in particular that says listen on port 4000. Sometimes, especially if it's the first time that you're running it, it will take a while for this log to appear. And so at times you might see absolutely nothing here. To refresh, you can either just click refresh or just go to another page and then click back onto it and just wait until you see listen on port 4000. One thing that I also want to mention that's also pretty cool here is under docs, if you specify the schema and everything correctly, they already actually have a built-in sort of Swagger configuration that you can see and sort of test your endpoints here. I have not set it up correctly, so we can't like if you click try it out, you can actually specify an event body and whatnot, sorry, a request body and whatnot. But if you do, this is definitely a pretty cool and useful tool that's already been integrated in there for you. And yeah, so we're just going to give it a second, and once it's deployed, and because the time, I'm noticing the time is not right here, so once it's deployed, we'll be back. And so we're back, and it has been deployed. As you can see, a new set of logs have been generated, and the last one was listen on port 4000, and the time should be correct now. And so once, just before we go to do some testing, we can actually go ahead and enter Postgres admin. That's just a free tool that you can download. It's already connected to the database. I just want to show you that the database is currently empty, so there's nothing in it in the table. But let's go ahead with testing it. So we're just going to go open up Postman once again, and we're going to go through the normal procedure of creating something first. So we'll have some really general names here, just name 1 and quantity of 2. And so as you can see here, we're returning the response back, which means it should have been successful. If we just get all the products on the table, we can see that we have inserted it successfully. And now let's go back to Postman. I'm just going to make sure that our get still works. And as you can see, it returns an array with it, the element inside. So if I just create another one, another entry with say 100, although I'm not sure why you would have this, but just because of the way the API is built, it should also get all of them because name is currently not unique. And so we can confirm that it still works. And awesome. So if we also want to test our update, I've already pre-configured it like this so that it takes in these 3 arguments specifically. We want to change the name, let's say to name 2, new quantity, we want to change it to, let's say 50. If we hit send, we should notice that if we hit get all now under this name, we should see that all the entries with name 1, which is 2 entries, have been updated to have name 2, which is why we do not get any entries back with name 1. If we just hit name 2, we can see that they have been updated indeed, and they all have quantity 50. And just to confirm that as well on here, we can see that they have also been updated. And awesome. And last but not least, let's just quickly do delete. Under delete, all we need to specify is a name. So I'm going to do name 2, and we should expect that both of those entries have been deleted. And so if we just go here, you can see the table has now been cleared. And awesome, so that just pretty much shows you that our API is now working. It's pretty much all deployed. And under the free tier, I believe it's deployed for 7 days at a time. I think they do some new deployment thing. And feel free to look at the pricing page as well, just for further details. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's pretty awesome how fast we're able to get things deployed and things working. So just to quickly go over some of my final thoughts on the platform, overall from some experimentation and going through some of their starter examples, I would say it's definitely really easy just to get things up and running and set up. I would say that it's, at the moment, I think it's pretty useful for doing things like prototypes. I haven't really tested things more at a larger scale just yet. But in terms of just building simple applications that are ready to go quickly, I think this is definitely a really good tool for that. And of course, like there's a lot of features where I haven't really tried yet. And of course, I encourage you to try as well, which is in terms of built-in event triggers, library functions, and whatnot. I think it's pretty exciting in terms of the direction they're moving towards, and just allowing a lot of both beginners and advanced engineers to also build serverless applications. I would say that because they are still a startup, perhaps one thing that could be improved is under the logs. It's just that sometimes there's a lot of latency and logs may be a little bit unclear in terms of what's happening behind the scenes, since a lot of things are indeed masked by the UI. So sometimes debugging can be a little bit tricky, but I do think that their documentation does compensate for that. For the most part, the documentation is pretty clear, explains clearly what things are, what's going on, and I think, yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty great tool. It's really easy to set up, and if you're just experimenting for serverless applications for the first time, I definitely think this is a great way to kind of get started into the realm of building serverless applications. But yeah, I just want to thank you again all for tuning in for this sponsored video, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Take care.